Welcome to another installment of Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. Well, in the previous video I showed you my dad's 1987 Toyota Camry. Well, there are a lot of Old War stories with that. So we'll start with the Crusher. My mother is known as the Crusher. That car has been in no less than 7 different accidents. It's amazing I'm still alive with how she drives, or how she drove. I only remember a few of them. We got that car in late 1986. I was in, remember these are unscripted, so I got to think back and kind of jog my memory to get all the details. I was in, I believe, the 5th grade, and they called the school or something, and I was told, no, maybe not, I don't even remember, it doesn't make a difference. But anyway, my mother was in an accident. At the time, she was working for some place that I'll withhold the name, but they kind of blister-packed CDs and shrink-wrapped cassettes, and they sold music and stuff. She was a shrink-wrapper and blister-packer and things like that. A lot of interesting characters there. Kind of fell into the job through different avenues. But she was going to work like she would any other day, and there was an overpass, 2 lanes, merge into one under the overpass. Okay, so now you got to merge and go under this overpass thing at the same time. Well, being that she thinks she drives a Mercedes even though it's a Camry or whatever it is. No, actually what happened was somebody rear-ended her. Now, is that because she cut into their lane or something? I don't know. From what I remember, the other car was red, and the hood of that car, like, they braked really hard, and the hood of that went under the back of the Camry. I was really too young to understand the ramifications of all of this and whatever the deal was. My dad went to a couple of different shops and finally found one he was comfortable with. I think they were German, and they put that car brand new. It was like it never happened. I've never seen body work like that. I think the trunk was a bit smashed. The taillights were, at least on one side, and also the spare tire well in the trunk got dented in, and that they hammered that all out and got everything good on that. So again, I was kind of too young for that, so I don't really remember much about it. The next one was a couple of years later. She went to the mall with my sister, don't know what for, and probably came to a sort of stop sign, and either she didn't stop or the lady going the other way didn't stop, or I don't know what the deal was. And it wasn't like a T-bone, it was sort of like a slide-by kind of thing, is about what I could tell you. That was a white car, because there was white paint on the front of it, and that damaged the hood, the fenders, the bumper, of course. And I remember it being in the garage, and my parents were in there, and my dad was maybe looking at it for the first time since it was hit, or I don't know the details. And I remember my mother saying, "Take my keys! Take my keys! I don't want to drive anymore." Well, he sure should have fucking done that. What a shame. So, I think he ended up bringing it to the same shop, and once again, it was restored to pristine beauty once again. No problem whatsoever. I'm sure there were others. I forget many of them. But the one that really did the car in was years later. In the town where I grew up, there used to be a place called Shoppers Village. Shoppers Village was a place that had little booths. Sort of if you ever go to a fair, like a street fair, and they have all the little vendors with their little booths and that. Well, this was a building, and they had little booths set up. That was a staple of the community for, 14 years, at least that I remember, until they closed. And then they reopened years later It went from that place to, I think, a National Wholesale Liquidators. Then they went out, and it went back to Shoppers Village for like a relaunch, and that didn't last, and now it's back to a National Wholesale Liquidators, which is still an interesting store. Anyways, with those details aside, Shoppers Village for the second time was closing. I was in high school, 9th grade, maybe 10th grade, something like that. So this had to be in 92, 3, 4, somewhere in there, we'll call it. And the car was at that point 5 to 8 years old. That is really where the damage occurred, and it's an interesting sort of two-parter. The way this one goes is she went in there because Shoppers Village was closing, and she wanted jewelry at a huge discount. Now, these places are not going to be selling their jewelry at a discount. They're going to pack it all up and pack it into suitcases, and you'll find them the next week on a street corner in Manhattan selling their shit there illegally. Well, she thought she was going to get huge discounts, so she rushed out there on a rainy day, no less, and went there, got her shit, got in the car, and went out of the parking lot, and now needs to make a left. Now there's 2 lanes going this way and 2 lanes going this way. Her story claims that everything was clear. She went to make her left turn, and a car came from this direction out of nowhere at breakneck speeds and crashed into her. Well, at this point, things in her life were changing, and she decided to go to the hospital. She didn't need to go to the hospital. She just wanted to go to the hospital. The car was towed to a nearby auto body shop by the name of Rice's Auto Collision. Rice's was a staple of the community for many years, but we never went there because we never needed it, and unfortunately that place with the Germans had closed up shop some years prior, so we couldn't go there. It was at Rice's, we needed it fixed, and we figured they'd been there long enough. Well, they fucked this car up. They did a shitty job on it. The bumper on the front was trashed, the fenders were trashed, the hood was trashed, the metal valance in the front where the hood would then wrap around the front of the car was trashed. The grill, you name it, the whole fucking front end was just terrible. And they did a completely shitty job on the car. A really shitty job on the car. And the paint didn't match, it just didn't look right. And they even went so far as to somehow spill some crap on the driver's front seat. Some white stuff, we don't know what it is to this day, that was spilled on it. After my dad complained to them, they tried cleaning it, but there was only so much that could be done. It was pretty much a total disaster on that. And they fucked the seat up, and I seem to remember he ended up getting his deductible back, is how the story I remember it goes. But that's not the end of the story. Some years later, maybe 2, maybe it was only a few months. Yeah, it was a few months, come to think of it. It was a few months later. That was in January or February. And now we're in April, mid to late April. So it's starting to now get warm out. You were hitting some 60-degree days, maybe even 65. And we took a road trip to see some friends of my parents in New Jersey. We were going to spend the night there and come back the next day. So we're in the car, and we're driving, and we're doing our thing. And we're going, and maybe a mile or 2 from our destination, I remember my dad saying, "Why is the car overheating?" And the temperature gauge was like way up. We stopped and looked and kind of limped it over there and let it cool down, and he looked at it, didn't know what the deal was, and that was that. We did our thing. The next day, we go to drive back, and going from New Jersey into Brooklyn, I guess it was warmer that day, and the car overheated on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. The best place for it to happen, of course. We somehow pulled off on a ramp or something, and my uncle, who lives in Brooklyn, came with 2-liter Coca-Cola bottles filled with water, and we topped the radiator up with that and limped it home, overheating and steaming the entire way. Anyway, we got home, and my dad is looking at the car, and he's trying to figure out what the hell went wrong. And he decided that maybe the radiator fans weren't kicking on. So he opened up the fuse block, and lo and behold, the relay for the electric cooling fans was missing. It so seems at the time that our neighbor across the street had an 86 Camry. Now, it was basically the same car. The 87 just had a lot of styling changes in the interior and exterior and stuff like that. But it was basically, for the most part, the same engine, revamped a little bit, stuff like that. The nice old lady that lived there, her husband passed away, sad story, for another time that I won't even bother telling because it's none of anybody's business, really. But she was widowed, and my dad explained the story and said, I want to borrow a part out of your car. And she let him, and he took the relay and walked back across the street, popped it in, turned the key, and lo and behold, the radiator fans came on. Okay, so next day we go to, I think it was the Toyota dealership, because I don't know at the time if you could have gotten relays and stuff like that as such from something like an AutoZone or a Pep Boys or whatever your big name, O'Reilly or whatever the hell it is. We don't have any of those out here. But whatever your auto parts stores are, you weren't able to get that, at least in our area, at the stores we had at the time. Or it was more expensive than Toyota, which doesn't sound right. It doesn't make a difference. We got a new relay for the tune of $25 or something like that. Popped it in, the radiator fan runs, and that's the end of the story. No, it's not the end of the story. Remember, in the video clip where I showed the car, I explained that that engine is now an old clanky. Well, that engine also lost oil pressure. And here's how it went, folks. Because the radiator fan was stolen. This is what we surmise. Because the radiator fan was stolen, and that engine overheated, but bad. Okay? But bad. It did some damage. And what happened was the oil pickup tube. Now what this is a thing that goes into the oil pan at the bottom of the car, and it's a metal tube that goes to the oil pump in the engine that then pumps the oil around the engine and everything stays oiled. That tube at the bottom has a screen on it, and any debris and gunk and sludge and whatever in the oil, because it was superheated, became oil-borne, if you will, and deposited itself on that. The problem didn't appear until years later. It was a couple of years later, maybe 1997, 8, 9, somewhere in that range. I don't remember. Or it could have just been a fluke thing, we don't know, but we surmise it was from that. You'd just be driving and everything's perfectly fine, and then you'd be sitting at a traffic light, and the oil light would flicker and come on and then go out, and come on and go out, and it would just futz around. As soon as you drive, no problem. In the book, it actually explains that that actually can happen, and that's normal for that to occur, and don't be alarmed if it does. As long as the light goes out when you go to accelerate, it's okay. Probably still something you want to be you want to have looked at. But anyways, the light would go on, come out, come on, go out, etc., etc. And this went on for a couple of years. And then one day the problem mysteriously went away. And then, as suddenly as it went away, it came back, but this time with a vengeance. And my dad was driving the car, and he was like 3 blocks from home, literally. And the oil light came on and stayed on. And it seemed to be running fine. It wasn't clanking or doing anything bad. So he drove it and got it home. And by the time he got it home, 3 blocks, it was clanking. That was all it took. The guy who looked at the car said that a cam follower was damaged. I don't know what that is or anything about it. I'm not a mechanic by trade, nor do I play one on YouTube. Although sometimes I have had a couple of videos where I make believe I know which end of the wrench to hold. Anyways, he looked at it, and that's what he determined had happened. In the meantime, my dad took out the oil pressure sender and had screwed in a pressure gauge, actually, that somehow read, and it actually, you'd start it up and you would get oil pressure, and it was there, and it would read, and then just sitting there idling, it would just do its thing, and then just gone out of nowhere, and then just suddenly it would just come back. So really, it was losing oil pressure for no reason. Well, we knew the reason was because of that, which of course we all found out later. And as such, the guy who determined that the cam follower was damaged basically said, for me to tear that apart, it's not even going to be worth it for how old the car is. My dad said, what's your suggestion? And he said, turn the radio up a bit louder. Don't worry about it. And here it is, 200,000 miles, still running, still clanking, but it works. The oil pickup screen, the way that was fixed, although the part could be replaced, he actually took it out of the car and burned the screen off with his oxyacetylene torch and burned all the crud out of it and reinstalled it, and never an oil light again. So that's that story on the Crusher and all of the damage. All because she wanted to get jewelry at a discounted price that wasn't actually discounted to start with on a rainy day. So those are just a few of the accidents that I remember happening with that car. Like I said, there were many, many more. And the driving skills never improved that I know of. I remember of one incident in particular where it was okay to make a left on a red without any kind of green arrow. At least in her mind it was. Wasn't an accident that time. Damn good thing, because I was in the car. And fortunately, I was never in the car for any of these accidents. But it's, you know, again, there have been many. So, anyway, I'm sorry this video was a lot longer, but there were a number of things I wanted to cover. So I hope you enjoyed this little story here with Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.